Hello, BookTube. Welcome to another fiction review. My birthday falls in early January. And it's far too close to Christmas and New Year than I would really like. I don't know whether this is true for other January children, but just speaking for myself, I've learned to expect low key when it comes to celebrations, right? Everyone I know is usually on a diet or they're in debt from all the holiday indulgences and they aren't ready for party and they aren't ready to give me presents. And so, I just learned to love small indulgences and I've learned to go ahead and just treat myself. And so the book that we will look at for today's review was my 2023 birthday gift to myself. Today's novel is The Vendor of Sweets by R.K. Narayan. It was first published in 1967. The paperback copy that I obtained is the Penguin edition, and that was published in 1983. So, first question. This is the chance for my new subscribers to get used to the different questions that I have for novels as opposed to nonfiction. The question is, can I pitch this novel? That is, to do kind of a marketing thing. Sometimes I'm good at that, and sometimes I'm absolutely rubbish. I think today might be one of my rubbish days. The main character, Jagannath, who's known as Jagan, is 60 years old. He was a follower of Mahatma Gandhi, and he joined in the protests in his youth, and he voluntarily went to prison in support of India's struggle to gain their independence from British colonial rule. Now, after his release, he sets up a business in his town selling sweets, but he never tastes the delicacies that any of his cooks produce. He believes that it's right to conquer self-desire, and he follows a strict diet that is sugar-free, salt-free, even rice-free. And he is thrilled that his only son, Mali, has gone away to America to study, or at least he was. When Mali comes back home and seems to have a head full of crazy, dangerous, even blasphemous ideas, Jagan tries and fails to comprehend. Worse, Mali brings a foreigner with him, a girl named Grace. Jagan assumes they're married, but the truth about their relationship just becomes one more crazy thing. How is he going to make peace with it all? That's my pitch. Okay, so how many pages long is this? This is a lovely short book for anybody needing a break if they've been reading some longer material. It's only 137 pages long. The length of that book should not be taken as an indication of the greatness of its impact. I finished it 3 days ago, and the funny thing is the characters are still haunting my mind. They're like benevolent ghosts, and I've caught myself a couple of times wondering what happens to them, as if they were real, as if the story was going on and I'd exited. Next question is always, where did I obtain this book and how much did I pay? Well, this book came from the Oxfam charity shop in Stratford-upon-Avon. They had a couple of shelves set aside with just Penguin classics, and you'll all know if you watch my other videos, I put a lot of stock when seeing that little bird logo on a back cover. The shop obviously had plenty of Shakespeare's birthplace, but I was looking for something that didn't come out of my English literature syllabus because my university course was ending. So I was in one of those book buying moods. I thought, I want a new voice, a voice I've never heard before. And then there was the title, The Vendor of Sweets. I just thought, well, obviously that just made it sound even more of a treat, an indulgence. But I paid a very reasonable £2.50 for my little paperback. Now, Kindle owners, I've got to tell you, I have tried looking online. I can't find an ebook version of The Vendor of Sweets. I also looked at Foyle's website. It was one of the largest booksellers in England, and Blackwell's. Foyle's do sell paperback copies, but not on Blackwell's. So you've really got to go to Amazon resellers or eBay and start looking for some of the older paperback and hardback copies. That's my suggestion. I mean, yes, you can buy it new from Foyle's, but I'm just going to tell you that the current Penguin reprint has absolutely no cover art. That may be a conscious decision to reflect Jagan's asceticism, but I don't think so. I think it's more likely that the book isn't selling well enough to justify the additional expenditure of artwork. Really a shame. I'll tell you what, because I've looked at a lot of covers online, and let's see if I can find the one that was my favorite. This one. Oh my God, if I could find this one. The reason I like it, A, the bright color, but B, of course, they've got those jalebi swirls. Jalebi is the sweet that you can see in the photograph behind us. Those are characteristic, those shapes. And that was really appetizing. And I think it's more important to draw attention to the indulgence and the eating of sweets rather than the asceticism. There is a lot of contradiction in this book. Contradiction is kind of the energy that drives this story. And you get that right from the very first lines of dialogue in the book. Let me read you here from page 1. "Conquer taste, and you will have conquered the self," said Jagan to his listener, who asked, "Why conquer the self?" Jagan said, "I do not know, but all our sages advise us to do so." From there, you could start a list of all the contradictions that you find throughout the text. For example, Jagan's listener is described as his cousin, but it's just a claimed relationship. If he was questioned, that cousin would quote, "always overwhelm the skeptic with genealogy." Jagan runs a sweet shop, but he's also the aspiring author of a book on diet which recommends complete abstention from sugar. There's a heap of stones on the roadside meant for paving that road, but the stones have not moved for 30 years. So there you can see these contradictions, they pile up throughout the book, and they provide humor, but they also provide a certain sadness. And I think they build slowly this overarching theme in The Vendor of Sweets about how should one cope with change and with confusion. My next question is always to talk about the author, give a short biography, as much as I've been able to research online. R.K. Narayan was born in 1906, and he grew up in Chennai. He was raised by his grandmother and his uncle. He became an ardent reader while he was at school, and these were British institutions, so of course they exposed him to authors like Dickens, Wodehouse, Arthur Conan Doyle, Thomas Hardy. After graduating from college in 1930, he did try teaching for a few years, but he gave that up and decided he would devote himself to writing. His first novel, Swami and Friends, was written in 1935, and it found a publisher because a neighbour and a friend was attending Oxford University, and the manuscript was shown to Graham Greene. And it was Greene who placed the book with English publishers Hamish Hamilton and arranged details for the publishing contract. Narayan went on to write another 34 novels, most of which are based in a town that Narayan invented called Malgudi, which, according to the results I did on Google, is located, let me see if I can bring the map up, around here. In his 60-year career, Narayan won more awards than it's really going to be practicable to list in this short review, but let's just say they include the Padma Bhushan and the Padma Vibhushan, the second and third highest civilian honors that can be bestowed in India. Next, I usually describe the setting. Now, obviously, since this book takes place in a fictional village, you'd think, oh, there's going to be so much great setting detail. Well, there may be in Narayan's other books, but the funny thing, the contradictory thing about The Vendor of Sweets is that although we're in a very definite setting, an expanding South Indian town that must be full of sights and sounds and things going on, you see the reader is always looking at it through the eyes of Jagan, who's lived there all his life, and his life has fallen into, well, I'm going to say a rut, but maybe the more diplomatic word would be routine. You know, he just goes from home to work to home to work, the same route every day. You get the picture. The one time that Jagan breaks from his routine and goes somewhere new, it's quite an unsettling experience for him emotionally and spiritually. You know, he sees the surroundings for the first time and it makes him look at his life for the very first time. Maybe that is Narayan saying something about the dangers of familiarity, because familiarity might be able to cause a kind of blindness. Next, I describe the narrative viewpoint and the narrative voice. Well, the narrative viewpoint is third person, but let's be honest, for 99 point, I don't know what percent of the time, the reader sees the world only through the eyes of Jagan. And that was a strange experience for me, and I'm going to put it out there that it'll probably be a strange experience for most readers. The book was written, we said, in 1967. So you have to imagine someone who was 60 years old back then, who had never traveled much, even within India. Things that might seem normal to us, things that seem normal to me, are completely baffling for Jagan. And so some of the tension that runs through the novel is really your own frustration, because you want to make yourself Jagan's mouthpiece. You want to help him think of the right questions, ask the right questions, so that he gains a better understanding of his son, among other things. But you cannot help him. Next question, is there anything readers should bear in mind when they decide to read this novel? There has been criticism about the ending, that it lacks drama, and I think that's fair. You could say that the last decision Jagan takes is to opt out of all the drama going on in his life, which is the drama going on in the story. So the reader is left at the end with no clear understanding of A, whether Jagan followed through with this decision or not, because, he is such a bag of contradictions, but B, whichever thing he did, what happened then? How did things actually resolve? Long after I'd put the book down, I found myself imagining different scenarios. Well, what if he did this? Well, but what if he did this? And that was a pleasant form of entertainment for me. But, if you prefer your books to tie up all their loose ends by the last page, then you now know the score with the vendor of sweets. In all my reviews, I always ask, is there problematic content in the book? And there isn't in The Vendor of Sweets, not as such. But there are events which happened to Jagan in his past which must have been very painful and very frightening. And I think you could have an open discussion, say in a book group, about how well or badly he must have dealt with his trauma, and whether how he did or didn't deal with his trauma is contributing to the difficulty he has now in coping with new things. Let's take, for example, this passage from page 31. When he remembered the word service, any activity became touched with significance. Service intoxicated him, sent a thrill through his whole being, and explained everything. The first time he had heard the word was in 1937, when Mahatma Gandhi visited Malgudi and had addressed a vast gathering on the sands of the river. He spoke of service, explaining how every human action acquired meaning when it was performed as a service. Inspired by this definition, Jagan joined the movement for freeing India from foreign rule, gave up his studies, home, and normal life, and violated the British laws of the time. Neither the beatings from the police nor the successive periods of prison life ever touched him when he remembered that he was performing a service. Jagan dismisses his ill treatment like that, but he could probably write a book about what happened to him in prison. The novel also reveals how Jagan nursed his wife at home, probably without access to the very best medical treatments, as she was dying from brain cancer. Narayan uses the book almost to challenge Jagan's notion that he was not touched, not affected by what he suffered. There is a dream sequence where Jagan recalls how much his younger self loved food and loved sex. It comes as a surprise to the reader by the time you get to it, because everything that they know about Jagan up to this point suggests that he has great self-denial. There's certainly denial of another kind, maybe, going on, but bear in mind that Narayan, he's aiming for observation in his book rather than resolution, so he'll always leave that question open. And my last question is always any suggestions for related or follow-up reading. There's a distinguished host of Indian writers who've published their works in English. In fact, does BookTube have an event that focuses on Indian fiction? I'm just thinking the 15th of August is Indian Independence Day, so it would be a fantastic way to celebrate. I don't know also whether you're aware, but there is a significant population of Indian BookTubers. I'm going to link in my description box to a channel called Geek India and their mega collaboration where they include messages from BookTubers who live in all the different states. I've also included a link to the list of the top 45 Indian novelists writing in English. And that's a wrap. But don't worry, there's no shortage of new material coming up, let me tell you. I am doing something a little bit different right now. I'm reading Val McDermid's Northanger Abbey, which, as you might guess, owes something to the Jane Austen novel of the same name. But how much does it owe? I wanted you to know how much, so I'm going to read both books concurrently. Literally, I'm reading one chapter of McDermid, one chapter of Austen, one chapter of McDermid, one chapter of Austen, and I'm keeping tabs on some things. Got some really fascinating points that I'd like to make there. And I don't know, that might be a review or it might be a sideline video. It depends how much I want to bring my opinions into that. Jury is out. For nonfiction, we're reading the transcripts from the Cambridge University Clark Lectures, which were given by the author E.M. Forster and titled Aspects of the Novel. And we need to fit in some time for Middlemarch meditations. But you see, there's the lovely thing about reading a novel that slow, isn't there? Look at all the other reading I'm doing around it, and yet I'm getting through Middlemarch. And that's the thing. For all of you who struggled with, I think Marion H., you admitted to having a tough time with Middlemarch. I think if I just tried to plow through it, I would too. But, I'm just going to do it tweak, 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 crumb by crumb. And meantime, I'm going to read a whole lot of other fiction I really enjoy. And I bet you in a year and a half's time, we'll have that book sorted. And we won't be able to believe that we've actually got that far. Anyway, guys, it was been good talking to you again. Look forward to seeing you for my next video. Take care. Bye-bye.